Hi guys, I've been getting asked this question: what cover crop should I plant over and over again in the last sort of couple of months as it's time to plant them? It's not such a straightforward answer. It's not a straightforward answer to the question, because it really does depend on the application. So where are we planting it? Is it wet? Is it dry? What are we planting next? Do we want it to stay there, or do we want to then plant something else after? So then we'll be asking if it's perennial cover crop or an annual cover crop. And so we'll go through some of the different applications I've got here. I do have a blog to go with this video that shows all the cover crops we've planted here over time and when to plant them. I update that each year as we get more feedback from the crops. So this field I'm in now is a perennial cover crop. So the idea here is I only wanted to turn the soil once to plant the cover crop, because we want to try to turn soil less, and we wanted a perennial cover crop with deep rooted grasses and legumes, so that they would improve the soil over time. So that was something we did last year. And the bottom of this field is wet and the top is dry. So the cover crops we choose for the bottom are perennial cover crops that can handle it being wet, like perennial rye and alfalfa. And then up here are things that need it where it's more dry. Okay, so we've got up here more like clovers and field beans, as well as some perennial grasses. So when we plant the perennial cover crop, what we did is last year we rotivated it all, and we added some lime because we're quite acidic, and none of the crops will grow too well in that acidic soil. We managed to get some organic certified lime, and then we put the seeds in there and some compost, and what we did, we let that grow, and then we didn't actually cut it back. We let it go to seed, so all the seeds dropped there, so we had an increase in the seed bank of the perennial cover crops. And actually what I realized is, it is an expensive seed and a big job. I wouldn't do it that way again. I think if I've got poor soil like we have here, I'll do an annual cover crop first, and that will just get rid of a lot of the weeds, loosen up the soil, and then the following year do another soil test, amend the soil, and then do the perennial cover crop to have a better establishment of the cover crops. Then this field that I'm walking into now, this is an agroforest. So here we have 5 rows of trees along swales, and I want to plant cover crops here. So I'm rotivating between the swales with my tractor. I'm actually finding it really hard because we're going along a contour line, so we're at a slight angle on the tractor. So one side of it rotates deep and one not so deep, and I'm always turning to go around these swales and around these trees. So I think getting the cover crops in before tree planting and swale planting is a must. Anyway, what I'm doing here is unlike the other field, I'm doing one type of cover crop only, and I'm doing one type of cover crop in each alleyway between the trees, and apparently they do better when they're not mixed. And also, if I want to save seed, because this organic seed is actually quite expensive, it'll be easier. So I'm going to have here, this is quite a dry space, so at the top here I'm going to have oats. This one I already planted field peas. This next one is going to be an annual rye, and these are all annual cover crops. Then in here it's going to be turnips, and then in this next one there's going to be, probably, haven't chosen yet, but probably clover. Okay, so in this field I'm putting in the annual cover crop, and I make sure I'm liming it first, putting compost and worm castings, and I'm going to grow it here. So this is a drier space. It'll be somewhere I want to plant winter crops. So what I'll be doing in February is cutting back the cover crop to drop the extra biomass here to improve the soil. I'll be then waiting for the plants to grow back, and when they start to flower, I'll be cutting them back again, because we don't want to lose the energy to producing flowers and seeds so much. Then I'm not going to rotivate it in, because it will be summer and we're not planting summer crops in a dry area. So we will leave it, and then maybe it grows back, and if it does, I will harvest as much seed as possible to do this again somewhere else. And then we'll do a soil test as well, and then next winter we'll rotivate it all in, amend again with more compost and whatever's needed, maybe some more lime. And I'm going to put here 5 permanent cover crops, 5 perennial cover crops here, but I'm going to do 1 type in each row. I think it will look quite cool to have a different type of cover crop in each row, because each row is a different type of fruit tree with grapevines and shrubs. So that's kind of the plan here. And then another type of application which is different, which we'll walk to now, it's a bit further, is the annual cover crops, where we want to put the cover crop in now and then follow with a summer plantation. Okay, so for example, our summer garden, where we're going to plant our summer vegetables next year. I've already planted the cover crops last week, or over the last few weeks. So the difference is with the summer garden is, first of all, we want annual cover crops, because we don't want them to remain there when we are growing our vegetables, because they'll become weeds. And also our summer garden is somewhere where it's very wet in the winter and also more moist during the summer. So we can only plant things that can handle it being more wet. And we just choose seeds which are annuals. And so I've rotivated it, put the lime, I've put compost, and then in this garden we're about to go to, I've put a mixed seed. And although they say it's better not to put a mixed seed, you know, I have done plantations before of one type of cover crop and nothing grew. So the advantage of doing a mix is, if for whatever reason one of the types of seeds doesn't germinate, or if the birds or ants get them, you've got another type that's going to grow. I've just walked into our reforestation field, and here we've got lots of trees planted with lots of space for them to get very big. And the sheep weren't here for 4 or 5 years, and they've just went in here this year for the first time. They don't like any of this grass. So anyway, I've decided to use this field now as a summer garden for vegetables, and it will probably change later to a permanent pasture once we've improved the soil. So here you can see I've rotivated. I've done it in 3 stages. So there's a stage behind me that the seeds have just germinated, and then there's this middle bit which I planted earlier, so you can sort of see the field peas sticking out. But here I've put in a mix of things that don't like it so wet, but not so much, just because I had them. But mostly here I've got white clover, and also rye, annual rye. And on the back corner I've got perennial rye, because I'm not going to grow summer vegetables there. So that perennial rye can grow and be cut and used as mulch in the garden. And then here as well I've got a mix of clovers and rye, and I chuck in a few of other things as well, like turnips, whatever I've got handy. And then yeah, this last patch I didn't rotivate so well, but here I've put a mix of flowers for bees that I harvested here. Just so whenever I do a plantation, I like to have a little space for the bees. So as I said, this is gonna grow now, but the difference here is we want to plant summer vegetables. So I will cut this back in like February if I can get in here, if it's not too wet. I'll probably cut it with a strimmer if it's too wet instead of the tractor. And then as soon as I can get in there with a tractor, perhaps in like May or June, I'll cut this all back again. The earlier the better, and ideally before it goes to flower or seed, And then once I've cut it all down with the strimmer on the back of the tractor, I will rotivate all of that in to get all of that biomass and nutrients into the soil. And then it should be nice soft soil, weed free. And then I'll bring in more compost from my sheep and my chicken system, so 2 different composts, as well as worm castings. And then I'll be ready to plant my summer vegetables there. So you can see how that's different to the other 2 applications. And we already did that somewhere else last year. So this time last year we actually cut back an area full of brambles and broom. We chopped it all back with a strimmer, rotivated it in, we put lime, we put a red clover cover crop, and it was a very wet area, but the red clover cover crop took really well. I've got a video on us planting that, and also us chopping that back and rotivating it in. I'm just walking down there now. So basically, yeah, last summer we rotivated that all in, and we put in our summer garden, which was very productive for us this summer. We sold veggie boxes and used the food for our guests. So we're just getting to that now. And yeah, it's been fantastic. So this winter, once I've harvested the last of the veg, I'm gonna cut this all back, just chop it all down with a strimmer, and I'm gonna rotivate all of this summer garden into the ground. And then I'm going to put a bit more lime and compost, and then I'm going to plant red clover again because it did so well here last year. So this is a very wet place now, and it will be waterlogged. But yeah, so I'm going to repeat this for this summer garden because it gets flooded. It's harder to do permanent no dig beds. So I'm going to do this rotation of summer garden and then cover crop. So this is the summer garden this year, but next year we'll have it up on that other terrace as well, or that reforestation field. So you can see this is now full of weeds, but we've still got some pumpkins to harvest here. We've still got some peppers. Look, there's some broccoli that will go in a veg box next week. Yeah, these beans are finished. You can see here the clover cover crop, and here on the path obviously we didn't rotivate it in. One other thing actually is last year I rotivated all the cover crops in here, but next year I'm only going to rotivate the beds, and I'm going to leave the cover crops on the path, which I'll have to keep strimming. But yeah, we've got hardly any tomatoes, but quite a lot of peppers and eggplants, so we just need another couple of weeks of harvest there, and then we'll put the cover crop in again, and it seems to work really well. I also planted some cover crops down here where it's more wet over a month ago. I was probably too early. It's kind of gone wrong, so let me show you that. Oh. Down here is where we had our corn. We had our corn down here, and then we harvested that, and we've got a load more vegetables growing here. So just before it gets too wet, hopefully we'll have a whole new round of vegetables. There's all sorts of stuff in here, two successions. But when I rotivated here to plant this, I also did down here, because I actually don't have a rotivator and I borrowed one, and it was better to do it whilst I had it, and it was here. So I planted vetch here, various clovers and field peas, and they have grown everywhere. Like you can see field peas here. You can never find anything when you're looking for it. Here's a lupin, although I don't think I planted lupin. Yeah, it's full of weeds, you know, absolutely full of weeds. So I don't know what went wrong, but the last time, normally it's mostly just a cover crop, and I think it's because here we haven't had sheep, here we haven't farmed, we haven't grown anything, and this is just every year being chopped and dropped and allowed to go to seed. So the seed bank here of the weed seeds is just immense. Okay, we've obviously got all this all these nice grasses growing here as well for biomass. And let me see if I can find anything else. yeah, there's some clover coming. So anyway, the plan is now not to let anything go to seed here, and rotivate this in for potatoes. For potatoes here. In our other gardens, we have more like permanent beds. So these are beds where we don't dig. They're no dig beds, and these are in the terraces that have good drainage. They don't get flooded. So in those beds we don't do cover crops. I don't do cover crops in the permanent beds. What I'll do is, once I've harvested, I'll just put a layer of compost and then cover it with cardboard, and that will keep the fertility there. I'll use a fork to loosen it up a little bit, but yeah, I normally just plant there in the winter. So during the summer I'll prepare the bed, weed it, compost, loosen it up with a fork and cover it with cardboard so it kills the weeds, or if any weeds grow, ready to plant. But I don't use cover crops there. Instead we just build fertility with compost. So this is like a hugelculture bed, where we bring compost. Let me just show you some cardboard. It's always nice to use cardboard for like quite a few months, even a whole season or a year. Kill off all the weeds. And if I prepare a bed and I'm going to plant it soon, I'll put plastic, because it's just much easier to roll out, as long as it's not there for too long. So anyway, that was a quick tour of the cover crops we're doing, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this other video from the cover crops we planted last year.